On March 4th, 2025, a white Camry pulled into my bay with 94,000 miles on the clock and an owner who had already been to 2 shops. The first shop told him the throttle body was failing. The second said it was a transmission sensor. He had quotes totaling just under $1,800, and he had not yet spent a single dollar because something told him to get one more opinion. He described the symptoms clearly: rough idle on cold starts, occasional hesitation between second and third gear, and a fuel economy drop that started showing up about 2 months earlier. Nothing dramatic, no check engine light screaming at him, just that slow, creeping feeling that something had shifted inside the car. I did not charge him a diagnostic fee. I did not plug in a scanner first. I asked him one question. Had he ever had the battery replaced or disconnected in the last 6 months? He said yes. A new battery was installed at a chain shop about 8 weeks earlier. That was enough. 22 minutes later, his Camry idled like it had just rolled off the assembly lot. No parts, no labor, no $1,800. Just a reset sequence that almost nobody in this industry bothers to explain, let alone perform correctly. Today I am going to show you exactly what that reset is, why Toyota engines specifically need it, and why the shops who skipped it were not incompetent. They were just working from a system that does not reward them for doing it. Here is something the automotive industry does not want you sitting with too long. Toyota builds some of the most precisely calibrated engines on the planet: the 2GR FE, the 1NZ FE, the A25A FKS in newer Camrys and RAV4s. These engines are engineered with tolerances so tight that their electronic control systems are constantly making micro adjustments most drivers never feel. When everything is working correctly, that precision is invisible. The car just runs. Smooth, efficient, reliable. You take it for granted. But that precision has a vulnerability that Toyota engineers know about, and that almost no independent technician ever addresses proactively. Modern Toyota engines do not just run on fuel and air. They run on data. The engine control module, ECM, is perpetually learning. It learns your idle pattern. It learns your typical throttle inputs. It learns how your specific engine breathes based on altitude, temperature, and fuel quality. It adjusts injector pulse width, ignition timing, idle air volume, and variable valve timing behavior based on what it has observed over thousands of drive cycles. This is what makes these engines so efficient and so adaptable. But it is also exactly what makes them vulnerable to learned corruption. Learned corruption is not a Toyota-specific term. It is my way of describing what happens when a precision learning system stores the wrong baseline and then continues making perfect decisions based on imperfect data. A sensor drifts slightly. A battery replacement disrupts voltage continuity. A cold snap causes the engine to run rich for 2 weeks straight. Each event nudges the ECM's learned parameters just a little. Individually, none of these events would matter. Stacked over months, they compound. The car's brain starts optimizing around a version of your engine that no longer exists, and the symptoms that result look almost identical to genuine component failure. This is the conversation most shop owners never want to have with customers because it ends with the customer walking out without buying anything. But it is the most honest conversation in automotive diagnostics. When a Toyota exhibits rough cold idle, it is almost always blamed on the MAF sensor or a dirty throttle body. When it hesitates between gears, the transmission control module or solenoids come under suspicion. When fuel economy drops without a code, shops throw oxygen sensors at it. These are not wrong diagnoses in a vacuum. They are wrong because they skip the most important first step, clearing the learned adaptations and forcing the system to relearn from scratch. Think about what happens when you replace the battery in a Toyota. The ECM loses its stored fuel trim values. The idle air control learns nothing has changed, but voltage characteristics during startup are now slightly different. The throttle position sensor is recalibrated against new voltage references. The transmission control module, which is separate from the ECM in most Toyotas, also loses its shift adaptation data. In a perfect world, the car would relearn everything from zero and stabilize within a few hundred miles. In reality, what usually happens is that the shop that installed the battery starts the engine, lets it idle for 2 minutes, and sends the customer home. The relearn process begins on corrupted foundations. The ECM starts adapting to conditions that are not representative of normal operation. That bad baseline becomes the new normal, and the symptoms the customer notices 3 weeks later trace directly back to those first 2 corrupted drive cycles after the battery swap. Now here is where Toyota is different from most other manufacturers. And this is the part that only about 1% of mechanics I have encountered actually know and apply. Toyota uses a specific reset procedure called the idle air volume learning procedure, sometimes referred to in technical service bulletins as the throttle position initialization reset combined with the ECM initialization sequence. This is not a generic battery disconnect. It is not a code clear. It is a targeted, multi-step procedure that forces Toyota's ECM to wipe its learned idle, fuel trim, and throttle reference data simultaneously, and then relearn all 3 in a controlled sequence. The distinction matters enormously because a generic battery disconnect does clear some adaptive memory, but it does not trigger the full relearn protocol that Toyota's ECM needs to rebuild its baseline correctly. You can disconnect the battery for an hour, reconnect it, drive 200 miles, and still have corrupted idle and fuel trim data because the relearn sequence was never initiated properly. Toyota has published this procedure in multiple technical service bulletins. It is not hidden. It is not proprietary. It is simply not talked about because there is no line item on an invoice for it. It does not require parts. It does not require a scan tool on every vehicle. In many cases, it requires nothing but a specific sequence of key positions, throttle inputs, and wait times performed in the exact right order. And when it is done correctly, on the right vehicle, the results are not subtle. Nothing. Let me walk you through what this looks like on a typical Toyota from roughly 2006 onward, because the procedure applies across a significant portion of their lineup, including Camry, Corolla, RAV4, Highlander, Tacoma, and Tundra variants, depending on engine family. The first stage is what Toyota calls the Engine Control Module Initialization, or ECM initialization. Before you touch anything else, you need to ensure the battery is at full charge. Not just connected, but genuinely at full voltage, because the relearn procedure requires stable voltage throughout, or the system will abort partway through and store incomplete calibration data. This is the step most people skip and then wonder why the reset did not work. With a fully charged battery, the engine cold, and the key out of the ignition for at least 10 seconds, you begin. Turn the key to the on position without starting the engine. Wait 3 seconds. Then, fully depress the accelerator pedal and release it 5 times within 5 seconds. This is not a rapid pumping motion. It is 5 deliberate full travel depressions. After the 5th release, wait 7 seconds, then hold the accelerator pedal fully depressed for an additional 20 seconds. During this period, if the check engine light begins flashing, you are on the right track. The system is acknowledging the initialization request. After the 20 seconds, release the pedal and start the engine. Do not touch the accelerator. Do not rev it. Let it idle completely undisturbed for at least 10 minutes. This is the relearn window. During these 10 minutes, the engine control module is rebuilding its idle air volume baseline from zero. It is measuring actual airflow through the throttle body under stable conditions and storing that as the new reference point. Interrupting this period, even briefly, resets the clock. But the throttle body initialization is only one half of the procedure. The second stage involves the transmission control module, or TCM, on vehicles with automatic transmissions, and this is the part that almost nobody performs because it requires a separate sequence and a short but specific drive pattern afterward. After the idle relearn is complete, take the vehicle on what Toyota technicians call a pattern road test. This is not a spirited drive. It is a controlled sequence designed to expose the transmission to each gear under light to moderate load in a specific order. Start from a full stop. Accelerate gently to approximately 20 miles per hour and hold that speed for 30 seconds. Continue to 35 miles per hour and hold for another 30 seconds. Then to 50 miles per hour for 30 seconds, then smoothly decelerate back to a stop without touching the brakes aggressively. Repeat this twice. What this does is give the TCM clean, repeatable data to relearn its shift adaptation tables. It learns the actual clutch pack engagement pressures, the torque converter lockup thresholds, and the shift timing under normal operation. The hesitation between second and third gear that brought that Camry into my shop disappears, not because anything was replaced, but because the TCM finally has honest data to work with. There is a third component to this reset that Toyota introduced with their newer engine families, particularly those with dual variable valve timing, VVTi, and the newer dynamic force engines found in current Camry and RAV4 platforms. These engines include a variable valve timing controller adaptation that must also be cleared and relearned after the engine control module reset or after any work that affects timing. Without that step, variable valve timing behavior remains calibrated to old data, and that can show up as inconsistent throttle response under partial load and as slightly higher fuel consumption on highway drives. This specific reset is performed through a scan tool on most 2018 and newer Toyota platforms. You access it through the engine menu under Utility Functions. It is labeled differently depending on the scan tool brand, but Toyota's TechStream software calls it the VVT Sensor 0-point calibration. It takes about 90 seconds to execute, and the engine must be at operating temperature. What it does is set a fresh reference point for the camshaft position sensors relative to the crankshaft, so the system knows exactly where both intake and exhaust cam sprockets are sitting at idle and can calculate real-time VVT position accurately going forward. Skipping this on a newer Toyota after a battery event or engine control module reset is like resetting your phone's home screen, but leaving the GPS calibration from 3 firmware versions ago. Everything looks normal, but certain functions are running off stale reference points. Now, I want to be direct with you about something, because this is where I see people make dangerous assumptions after learning this information. These resets are powerful. They work consistently, and they fix problems that shops often misdiagnose as component failures. But they are not magic. If your throttle body actuator motor is physically worn, the reset will not fix it. If your transmission solenoid is mechanically stuck, no adaptation procedure will restore it. If your oxygen sensor is genuinely dead and no longer cycling, the relearn will complete, but fuel trims will immediately climb back into problem territory within a few drive cycles. The way you distinguish a data problem from a hardware problem is simple. Perform the reset correctly, then drive normally for 3 to 5 days. If the symptom is completely gone and fuel economy normalizes, the problem was adaptive memory corruption. and you just saved yourself hundreds to thousands of dollars. If the symptom returns within a week, you have confirmed it is a genuine hardware issue, and you can now pursue that diagnosis with confidence instead of guessing. That distinction alone, knowing how to separate a data problem from a hardware problem before spending money, is worth more than almost anything else in modern automotive ownership. I have watched this scenario unfold more times than I can count. A driver comes in with a Toyota that has been through 2 shops and 3 quoted repairs. They are defeated. They have started mentally calculating whether the car is even worth fixing. And then the reset clears everything, the relearn completes, and they drive away in a car that feels like it did at 40,000 miles. Not because the shops before me were bad mechanics, because the incentive structure of modern automotive repair does not reward the 15-minute fix. It rewards a $900 throttle body replacement, a $600 sensor replacement, and the diagnostic hours that add up before anyone even touches a tool. Toyota built an engine that learns, adapts, and self-corrects continuously. But that system needs to be given clean data to work from. When it is not, it does what any learning system does with bad inputs. It makes perfect decisions in the wrong direction. The reset is not a trick. It is not a workaround. It is the maintenance step that every Toyota owner should understand and that almost none of them are ever told about. Here is what I want you to take away from this. The next time a Toyota starts showing rough, idle, inconsistent shift behavior, mild power loss, or unexplained fuel economy decline without a dramatic warning light, before you authorize any repair, ask the shop one question. Ask this: have you performed the idle air volume learning reset and confirmed that adaptive memory has been cleared and relearned cleanly? If they look at you blankly, or if they say the scan tool showed no codes and there is nothing to reset, then you know more than they do about how your specific engine operates. That knowledge is worth a lot of money, and if you do it yourself and it works, I want to hear about it. Share the make, model, mileage, and what symptom disappeared in the comments. Those stories matter because every one of them is money that stayed in your pocket instead of going toward a part you never needed. Modern Toyotas do not fail as often as the repair industry profits from you believing they do. They get confused, they drift, they adapt around conditions that no longer exist. The reset that brings them back is sitting in a service bulletin that almost nobody reads, waiting for the 1% who bother to look. You are looking now. That changes everything. If this gave you something real, hit like so more Toyota owners find it before they spend money they should not have to spend. Subscribe if you want more of these, because the next video exposes another Toyota system that silently degrades for 80,000 miles before anyone notices, and by the time they do, the repair bill looks unavoidable. It is not.